Don, shut up! Our show is starting! Shut up! Thank you. I'm Dustin, and I've been making tokusatsu props and costumes for over 10 years. I've won some awards, and it's led me to some pretty interesting opportunities.
I'm Don. I'm not any of that yet, but he's teaching me. And welcome to Suit Up!
Hey, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Welcome to Suit Up. This is a show specifically made for tokusatsu cosplay. I've been wanting to do something like this for a very, very long time, but I wanted to do it a little bit of a different way. I have some experience under my henshin belt, and I wanted to bring on somebody that doesn't have as much experience, so you can see what happens when somebody is learning from me, and also see what happens when somebody who's fresh with this stuff comes up with something new. That's the fun thing about crafting, is that you always come up with something new. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner, an intermediate, or an expert at this stuff, you will always come up with something new, and that's why I wanted to do this. I might do it a way that's different than my co-host. Speaking about my co-host, I better bring him in here. Alright, Hey!
Hey, Dusty. And hello, everybody. I'm Don.
So, this is Don. He is our co-host, and this is not a hologram. This is a lologram.
Because I'm the funny one.
Okay, anyways. So Don and I are going to be working on a couple of projects to show y'all what to do, and y'all can make them alongside us. So, what do you think we should do first, Don?
I think we should make some stuff from the original Kamen Rider.
Yeah, you know what? Kamen Rider. They are my absolute favorite superheroes. I love the Kamen Riders. You know what? I am down for that. So, let's go?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm honestly surprised you didn't rant about the costume first. You do know a lot about Ryder.
Oh yeah, no, I do know quite a lot about this stuff, and I could talk about it for a while.
No.
You know what, I guess I will.
No.
Be sure to download your pattern in the description down below. It's free, and you can follow along with us. This project is for beginners to intermediates. So we all know about Crossfire and Skullman's designs, but let's talk about how those designs influence years of Kamen Rider masks. First up, the shape and silhouette. Look how one simple shape decided to look for years to come. After reworking the design and coming up with a final motif, refining can start, and a design can be finalized for production. With reference in hand, sculpting can begin. When the sculpt is complete, it's time to make a mold. But before we get into molding and making of the mask, let's talk about the types of masks they made for Rider 1 and 2. The first design featured a more blue color overall, with a clear resin casted eyes backed with a red reflective material. Lights were installed to give a red color, but they kinda just read as pink. The jaw piece is shorter and features an additional ridge where the jaw meets the helmet. This is the A type of mask. It's the best looking one in my opinion. The Rider mask is made with 5 resin casted parts that connect in a clever way. The eyes slot onto the helmet and are secured with screws and a reflective backing. The O sensor is glued on, and the jaw is attached with straps and a baseball cap. This made getting it on and off easier for the actors. With a suit, cap, and a jaw piece adjusted, and with the mask slid over top, Kamen Rider is born, while sporting the same shape and some aesthetic of the initial design of Skullman. So let's talk about the last few iterations of Rider 1 and 2 and the B-type mask. Sakurajima Ichigo features a black and green B-type mask with red eyes. What's a B-type mask? Similar to the A-type, but missing the jaw edge on the helmet, and a longer jaw piece with an additional strap to hold the helmet onto the jaw. Now, Sakurajima Ichigo wasn't the first to use this type of mask. It wasn't Nigo's first suit either. The mask type was first seen as early as episode 5. Why they changed back to the A-type, only to go back to the B-type for the remainder of the show, is a mystery, but some speculate it was because it was better for covering all of the different suit actors' faces. The final look is the Shin Ichigo and Shin Migo suits, or New 1 and New 2. They're the ones used the most in the show and feature a slightly improved B-type mask. So let's break down a completed B-type mask. There are the compound eyes, 2 mask halves, the jaw and the adjustable cap, the tier eye holes for the actor, and 2 old radio antennae. Now, remember that strap on the B-type mask? It didn't work for everybody, but you could see why it started becoming necessary. Without it, sometimes the silhouette would become broken. If you look closely, you'll find the strap hidden and slightly camouflaged by paint in some of the older episodes. Back to the molds. The original molds were probably made in plaster, and the helmets were casted in fiberglass or FRP, as that was the usual method back in the day. Fiberglass resin is strong, but it's pretty tough for beginners to start working with. But nowadays we use silicone molds and compound resins to make our masks. As with old materials and new, molding and casting is expensive and unforgiving of mistakes. And we are about making $100 mistakes here at Suit Up. So while researching, I found a latex rubber stunt mask of the original Kamen Rider. Floppy and uneven, but still resembling Kamen Rider thanks to its silhouette, you know, the one that we talked about at the start. With 2 designs in mind and EVA foam on my side, I found a way to reproduce a good-looking original Kamen Rider mask on the cheap, which is much more our style here at Suit Up. Alright, let's take a look at this pattern. This pattern was designed for beginners to intermediates in mind. If you're a beginner, don't worry about the extra instructions, just cut it out. But if you're intermediate, here's some extra instructions to help you out. This is the left front and the left side top. You want to reverse these to get the right side, so just cut these out and flip them over to get the right sides. Over here's the jaw. The jaw has a bunch of instructions like feathering. Feathering is really important. Anywhere there's a line like this, I want you to feather it. There are some exceptions, I'll get to that a little bit later. Over here, we have some lines for extending the jaw. Now, this is if in case you want the B-type mask. You want to extend that piece up higher past where that crusher would meet. It'll make sense when we get to the actual cutting. Over here, we have where to extend and where to glue on certain points. I made sure that I added glue points so that you guys know where certain pieces go. Like this A-type extra crusher bit slides in right there. Now over here, we have the clamshell line. This is in case you want to split your helmet in half. It's not necessary to cut, but it's there in case you want it. Over here are the ears. It has a bunch of feather lines. Don't worry about that unless you really want to feather it yourself. You could cut these pieces out and cut them yourselves. Over here are V-cuts. You want to V-cut the jaw to get these angles. You could also V-cut these parts right here with the feather lines, but that's up to you. It could be feathered or it could be V-cut. All right, I think that covers up just about everything. If there's anything else we need to tell you, Don and I will let you know as we're making these parts. So we're here, time to print it. Let's go. So here we are in Microsoft Paint. Now, you want Microsoft Paint, not 3D Paint, just Microsoft Paint. This also works with Paint on the Mac if you still have the old version of it. All you need to do to print these things out, first off, make sure your whole image is in the screen. Down here at the bottom right corner, you should be able to zoom out. Then you're gonna go up to File, you're gonna go to Print, and Page Setup. On Page Setup, you need to make sure that you set your orientation that you want, and you also have to make sure this is correct in Print Preferences. We'll do that a little bit later. I like printing landscape. Then you're gonna go to your margins, and you're gonna get them as close to 0 as you can for your printer. Next, you wanna make sure that horizontal and vertical centering is off. Do not check either of these. Do not check any of these. Don't. These are bad, don't use them. Next, scaling. You want this to print at 100% size. You do not want this to fit to one page. It will not work on one page. It'll be entirely too small. So set it to adjust to 100% scale. Notice how this over here gets really big? That's important. This is gonna get spread out across multiple pages, and you're gonna have to trim off the edges and line up the pieces and tape them together. It's a little bit cheap, but it's the quickest and easiest way to get the patterns printed. Next, we're going to go back up to print and hit print, but we're not actually gonna print just yet. Before we hit print, we wanna go to preferences. Once you pick your preferences, it should ask you what all you want. Click advanced. Sometimes you need click advanced. Make sure your paper set the letter, say okay. Make sure the orientation is set to the same as you set it earlier. Mine's landscape, so this is gonna be set to landscape too. Click okay, select your printer, and go ahead and print.
All right, once you have everything printed, go ahead and cut off all the margins on the paper, those little white pieces that you just don't need. It's easier to line them up without them. Once you have the pages lined up, go ahead and tape them over. This is going to be the cheapest and easiest way to do it from home. You can get these printed at a specialty store, but it might be a little bit more expensive, hence why the tape method might be cheaper. Plus, you can do it at home. You don't have to go outside. It's nice. It's not like we haven't been cooped up for a year or anything. Anyways, once these are cut out, make sure you cut them all separate so that you have enough room to work with each one. It's kind of hard to work with one big page. Once everything's separated, go ahead and cut these out. When you're cutting them out, be sure you cut them on the outside of the black line. So when these pieces are laid out, you should be able to see the black lines. Ignore the fact mine's red. I ran out of black ink. Relatable, right? Haha. Alright, all the pattern pieces are cut out. I'm going to take some caps and I'm going to cut off the brims. And then I'm going to send the pattern to Don so he can cut his out.
Thanks, Dustin. I got it from here. And, of course, special thanks to Dustin for making this awesome pattern. And if you guys are watching this at home, this pattern itself is available for free in the description down below. You know, well, if you haven't already grabbed it. Anyways, I started by cutting out the shapes on the template plans and pinning them down, as you can see here, with sewing pins. It helps to be economic with the space used on the foam to maximize how much foam you have left over from cutting in case you need to recut pieces when you're in a pinch and you're out of foam. It's a lifesaver, really. I then used a marker to trace the outline of the shapes. It's pretty self-explanatory. Then I used a knife to cut the shapes out of the EVA foam. But before I get into the rest of that, you have to make sure you keep the knife sharp or you keep spare blades, or so help me God, I'm gonna kick down your door. I'm gonna come inside. I'm gonna say, hey, how's it going? You need some spare blades. Here you go. Here's a knife sharper too. And I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna fix the door. I'm gonna leave peacefully. And nothing illegal happened. Nothing. Anyway, when cutting out what you traced, you cut on the inside of the marker line, not outside. Inside basically is copied the clean edge of the paper, provided you cut the template cleanly. So, cut the template cleanly. This equals a nice clean line traced onto the foam to follow when cutting. And yeah, just stick the knife in there and follow along the line carefully. You can actually see sometimes that I'm angling my knife inwards or outwards, and that's so I get an angle cut on the foam. This will help later down the line in the gluing process. For certain pieces, they have instead of like a gradual curve, it's like a sharp like change in direction, so those angles help aid in the change of direction. And from here on out, it was pretty much smooth sailing, you know, lots of straight slices. Sometimes the knife, it didn't cut through all the way because I didn't quite sharpen it. See, I look out for you, huh? All right. So what I did with the knife, as I was saying, I took it along the part I already cut and just ran it along the same line, and it cut it out. Sometimes you'll have to pass through it twice. It's no biggie. Don't panic. We got you. Ooh, this part was fun. On the template, there are undercuts marked for helping with shaping some of the foam pieces, because sometimes you don't have to cut separate pieces. Sometimes it just helps to create like a little undercut and then glue on the inside, and that creates the shape if you want it a bit softer or have it blend in well. It all depends on the helmet, really. From there, in order to get those grooves, I used my soldering iron. Dustin obviously has showed you different methods. This is my preferable method, and you might find something different, but that's the beauty of this craft. You can find methods some people might not even have thought about. And that's pretty cool, I'd like to think. But anyways, I took the soldering iron and ran it along the lines and made sure I got a deep enough groove so that I could hold glue in there and get that shape I wanted. Dustin's got this next bit. Dusty, your turn.
All right, thanks, Don. First thing I decided to work on was the earpiece. I went ahead and cut all the darts that were on the bottom of the ears. And then a little bit later on, I found the areas on the top where I wanted to add new darts for offsets. In the middle, I added some V-cuts on the back. I like to do V-cuts in 3 swipes. One down the middle, two down the sides at 45-degree angles towards each other. Then I just rip them out, and it makes it a little bit easier to work with. After I have all the pieces cut and separated, I try to see how I want them offset. I always want to make sure that the next piece is a little bit higher than the next, so they make like little stairs. Always make sure the one towards the front of the mask is highest, and the one furthest away from the back of the front of the mask is the furthest down. So little stairs going down as you go back towards the helmet. I repeat the same process with the other half. If you're wondering where the right half template is, there isn't one. All you have to do is take the left half template and flip it. Saves paper. This is the jaw piece. I'm doing the same thing with the V-cuts. You can see them right there. See, it's a V. V. So I took the pattern and I used some pins to help gauge exactly where my next V-cuts needed to be, because I really didn't want to put too many Sharpie marks on this. I recommend you put Sharpie marks down, especially for registration and V-cuts, so you know what you're doing. Me, I've done this enough to where I kind of have an idea what's going on. Plus I made the pattern, so I should know what to do. Anyways, I used the pins to help guide exactly where I wanted to lay down my ruler and cut out those straight lines into my V-cuts. Be careful doing V-cuts, you don't want to go all the way through the foam. It's not a good idea. You can do it, but it makes a mess, more work to do later. This is the chin part, and on the chin part I cut in at a 45-degree angle all around the top parts of the chin, everywhere that was going to attach to the jaw. The bottom part I left flat. But the reason why I went ahead and did this at a 45-degree angle was so that it could all hold together really nicely. Give the nice shape that it should. Have that nice angle on the jaw. You'll see, it comes up here in just a moment. I took some contact cement and spread it onto both parts that I wanted to connect and let them dry for 5 to 10 minutes before attaching. You cannot attach wet contact cement, it needs to be dry. That's a cap, we're going to add that on later, probably in the next video. This is the centerpiece and the bottom parts of the dome. I used the bottom parts of the dome to gauge exactly where I needed to make my V-cut on the center, since that's where they attach in the back. I need to curl this so I know exactly where the back of the helmet is going to end. I also did a couple more 45-degree angle cuts on the front of the center and another V-groove on both sides and the tip of the center part. These are for some shapes that I need later on with the rest of the dome parts. This will help curve it and bring it together to make that nice round rider shape that we like. But this part right here is going to have that rectangular shape that's on the front center of the Kamen Rider mask. This is that part that sits between the two eyeballs and teardrops that are on the mask. I'm being very careful with these V-cuts not to go through the foam, just getting in deep enough to where I can manipulate the foam to look like it has a curve on the top, or an edge. I was being very careful when pulling and removing all this foam. I really did not want to make any mistakes and have to make a new part. So you do the same, be careful. Be part of the Careful Cutters Club. Slow, careful, relaxed, and controlled. After all the parts were cut, I started forming the foam just a little bit to get an idea of how that was going to fit together. Decided I needed to do a few more V-cuts just to make sure I got the right angles. See how I'd handled that? It's just 2 V-cuts on the sides and 1 at the bottom. They all fold together like this. There should be a little tiny tip of foam left over on the bottom part. The reason is that this connects to another piece later on. It's the under part of the dome. It has a small little notch in it that you should see in the future parts of this video. I'll point it out to you, don't worry. So this is the top crusher, and I have to feather these edges down. Feathering is the process of just taking a Dremel and removing a little bit of material and taking a hard edge and making it rounded. We'll come back to it a little bit later. Right now, we need to finish gluing the centerpiece. So I glued up the back of the V-cut, and then I went back to the front where I glued all that stuff and put them together. Then I found the front under parts and I did a 45-degree angle cut towards it on the front part of the piece. This is the one with the notch I was telling you about. On the pattern, it has a little red dot. That matches up with the front of the centerpiece. So that little notch that you see sitting out just below the pattern right now on the centerpiece, that little part connects up there. Alright, so I do another 45-degree angle cut on the front of the mask. And I do it again on the right side of that mask. And there's a back part. I do it again on the back bottom part because those two parts attach to the bottom. All three of these parts attach. That weird long bit that's sticking out, that actually attaches to the back bottom piece. It makes like a weird chevron shape, and that's the same shape as the earpiece, so you know where the earpiece will sit later. I went ahead and glued all these edges and waited for them to dry. You're going to be waiting for glue to dry a lot. It takes some time. Again, 5 to 10 minutes. Also, there's Takumi. Hi, Takumi. Be sure when you're gluing to do this in a well-ventilated area. This stuff smells not super great. And I love how I put it in at the end of the video, so if you're shouting at me about it now, I'm sorry. But you should have known better first. I put my contact cement inside a glue bottle. It makes it a lot easier to spread it. This is my Dremel. This is what I use to feather all my edges. I use a stone grinding bit instead of a sanding bit because I feel like it's less harsh on the foam and leaves a much nicer, cleaner surface. See what I mean? That's a feathered edge, nice rounded corner. Now, the crusher we have to do a little bit more feathering to because it has to come down a little bit more than just a little bit of the edge being taken away. So I went across all of it as much as I can and brought it down. I went about 10 centimeters up the piece, angled my Dremel, and sanded it down till they all had the same angle going across. After I finished Dremeling those pieces together, I decided it was time to start putting the dome together. So here's the first two parts. These should match up and fit perfectly. You can always pull and stretch on the foam. Don't worry about breaking it. Just stretch and pull the foam if you need to get it to fit. Pinch, pull. Foam's versatile. You can make it work for you. So there's the shape for the ear, so I decided to finally start gluing the earpieces together. This can be a bit of a mess, so do your best. I made sure to get a little bit between all of the darts and also in the V-grooves. Although I thought it was enough glue, we're going to need to do some more later. You'll see where. Once those were dried, I attached them together and saw how they would fit in the mask. I want those pieces to be as flush up against the dome as much as I can. It's not going to be perfect, but you can do your best, and that's what I did, and I think it came out pretty good. You'll see. Don't forget, these all need to be offset so they look like little tiny stairs. My recommendation is do the big darts first, and then do the ones where all you have to do is just slice once. See? Stairs. I went ahead and took the other half of the helmet and started gluing that together too. And if you're like upset that you're not seeing anything being put together, don't worry, I was too. I had no idea that my camera shifted that much while I was recording. So don't worry, next time we're going to change things around. Going to try to get a head-mounted camera so we don't have to worry about missing anything ever again. Once the two dome halves were finally put together, I finally decided to glue these together and put the earpieces on. Again, I put these on as flush as I could. It's not perfect and there's some mistakes, but don't worry, in the finishing video, we're going to be going over how to use rapid fill and other products to help make these look as smooth as possible. Back over to the top crusher, I had to glue this part on top of it. So if you check the pattern, you can see there's actually a place cut out that you can see where you need to lay down that top part. I glued these two pieces, waited for them to dry, and I attached them to each other. Back over on the centerpiece, I took my Dremel and I feathered the top edge. The reason why I feathered the top edge is because this actually needs to sit up slightly above the two dome pieces that we have. I measured 2 millimeters from the top down, marked a small little pen mark, and was able to figure out exactly where I needed to place the dome, so this centerpiece was slightly above the two dome halves. But before I got all that put together, I had to glue that piece on before I forgot. I also bent it to shape while I glued it, so it has that nice curvature. I started gluing the two under pieces together because these two will end up touching each other on the front and touching the center on the back. But now I'm gluing the sides, and these sides will attach under the two dome halves. Once these are onto the domes, we can finally put the two together. Here we are gluing up the edges of the dome, and again, 5 to 10 minutes. Gotta wait for glue to dry. Totally not going crazy waiting for glue to dry at all. Nope. Not at all. And the fumes aren't getting to me either. Nope. Okay, I'm lying. I hate the glue. The glue's the worst. Anyways, while the dome halves are like this, if you see any open areas, especially on the ears, now's your chance to throw in a little bit more contact cement, let that dry, and pinch those pieces together. Do that before you put these whole pieces together as one. All right, here we go. We're gonna start putting everything together here. I took the bottom parts and started attaching them to each dome. Make sure the part with the notch is going towards the front of the helmet. That attaches to the centerpiece, or else this will not match up correctly. That's a nice cutting mat. It'd be cool if there was something being made on it. Oh, there we go. Cool. Yeah. So just very carefully and very smoothly, start moving these pieces together and make sure you have that slight offset. You should be able to see it on here. The only place where there isn't an offset is right up at the very front, where we call the nose. Those little notches where that little tiny triangle bit from the centerpiece was still sticking out, that attaches to the notch. And if it comes out just right, it should be completely flat. Once you get half of the first dome on, get the half of the other dome on. It'll make it a lot easier to start putting this back half together instead of having to do one half on top of the other half. Go halfway with each one and then start slowly putting it together. Oh, in here is important. Make sure you tighten up all those little tiny edges and round them over. This is for the overall front shape. You're gonna need this for the eyes way later on. Make sure that centerpiece is well constructed. All right, so last part. I take my Dremel and I clean up the edges because this part right here is gonna go right onto the bottom of the helmet. I glue right there on the top and let that dry. And then I glue on the bottom ledge. After this is done being glued, you guessed it, time to sit and wait again for another 5 to 10 minutes for this glue to dry. Here, join me in this sped up footage of me watching glue dry. This is sped up like 600, 700% too, so like, yeah. Takes forever. It kind of makes you go crazy. You kind of antsy and you get tired of waiting to glue stuff together. And then you just kind of okay, anyways. Glued on the last part. Make sure it was curved and flush with the back piece. And, oh, hey, look. Top half's done. How nice. And then you can slide in the jaw. And would you look at that? The foam construction for your Kamen Rider helmet is done. There's some extra pieces laying around, but don't worry about those just yet. We're going to focus on everything else, including the finishing of the helmet, in the next video. So Don, how's yours looking?
And as you can see, mine came out a bit rough. Yours might too, doing it first time. I've done foam a few times, and it still comes out rough. But in the next video, I will show you how just because your initial assembly comes out rough doesn't mean that's the end. The real part where this will shine is how much time you're willing to spend in the touch-up and sealing seams and whatnot. From there, you'll have a pretty kick-ass helmet.
All right. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don really appreciates it too. We're going to be back sometime soon, and we're going to finish up this helmet. We're going to paint it, and we're going to do all the other detail pieces on it, so you guys can have your own complete Kamen Rider helmets. Until then, print out that pattern, cut out that pattern, make some helmets, and we'll see you here next time on Suit Up. Oh, you still here? Cool. Subscribe? That'd be really cool.